So when you hear the name Florence Nightingale, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Probably that iconic image, right? The gentle, heroic nurse, the lady with the lamp. And look, you're not wrong, but that's really only half the story. The other half is all about a revolutionary idea that completely changed medicine forever.
Okay, let's just get right to it, because the answer to this is a huge, resounding yes. Florence Nightingale wasn't just a compassionate caregiver. She was a brilliant statistician who learned how to use data as her most powerful weapon for change.
To really understand her genius, you have to go back to the beginning. See, she was born into a world that had a very specific and very limited plan for women of her social class.
On one side, you have the path that was expected of her, basically a gilded cage. Marry a rich guy, throw elegant parties, and become a fixture of high society. But then, there was Florence's reality. While everyone around her was focused on climbing the social ladder, she was burying herself in books on mathematics and philosophy and felt this deep, undeniable calling to care for people who were suffering.
So at 24 years old, she drops an absolute bombshell on her family. She tells them she wants to be a nurse. Now, you have to understand, in her time, nursing wasn't a profession. It was a last resort, seen as dirty work for servants. I mean, think about the drunk, incompetent nurses you'd read about in a Charles Dickens novel. That was the stereotype. For a wealthy, highly educated woman to choose this path was just scandalous. But Florence was not going to be stopped.
And that determination was about to be tested in one of the most brutal wars of the 19th century. In 1854, she was sent to the British military hospital in Scutari, Turkey. And what she found when she got there was an absolute nightmare. The conditions were just catastrophic. Men were dying in droves, and not from their battle wounds. They were dying from filth and disease. The hospital itself was actually more deadly than the enemy. There was no real sanitation, not nearly enough medicine. It was a total breakdown of basic care. But Florence didn't just stand there in despair. She organized. She immediately started creating systems out of the chaos. It was this methodical, brilliant attack on the problem. First, scrub everything. She got hundreds of brushes and got the less sick patients to help clean the place from top to bottom. Then, sanitize. She set up a laundry for clean linens. Then, nourish. She started a kitchen just for patients with special diets. And she didn't just stop at the physical stuff. She opened a classroom and a library, because she knew you had to care for their minds too. This was a holistic approach that was just unheard of at the time.
And this is where that famous legend was born. Every single night, she'd walk through those dark, crowded hallways with her lamp in hand, checking on every single man. This simple act of compassion earned her their total adoration and that iconic nickname that we all know today. But for Florence, compassion wasn't enough if you couldn't prove it worked, and the data she was recording was just grim. When she first arrived, a staggering 42% of the soldiers who were admitted to the hospital were dying. Watch this. Just 4 months after she put her new sanitation and care reforms into place, that death rate plummeted all the way down to an almost unbelievable 2%. The results were nothing short of miraculous.
Okay, so the results were plain to see. But that brings up the next huge challenge. Saving lives is one thing, but convincing the slow-moving, skeptical military bureaucracy to completely reform their entire system, well, that's a whole different kind of battle. How could she make them see the truth?
She did it with her secret weapon. This is where the compassionate nurse fully reveals herself to be a data visionary.
You see, she had been meticulously collecting data the whole time she was at Scutari, and it revealed a shocking truth. Her numbers proved that the real enemy wasn't the other army. It was preventable diseases caused by poor sanitation. I mean, just look. This tiny little bar for battle wounds compared to the massive bar for disease. It tells the whole story.
And think about the sheer scale of this. Her analysis showed that if her interventions hadn't happened, the entire British Army could have been wiped out just by the conditions in its own hospitals. This wasn't just a problem. It was an existential threat.
But she knew that columns of numbers wouldn't move powerful people to action. So, to make her data impossible to ignore, she invented a revolutionary new chart, the polar area diagram. It's often called the Nightingale Rose diagram, and it's brilliant. Each wedge of the rose is a month, and the bigger the wedge, the more deaths occurred. The vast areas represent deaths from preventable disease, and they just dwarf everything else. It was so clear, so dramatic, that any general or politician could look at it and understand the crisis in a single glance. Her incredible work in Crimea was really just the beginning.
She would spend the rest of her life using her dual passions, care and data, to build a legacy that would revolutionize not one, but two different professions.
And what a legacy it was. In 1858, she became the first woman ever elected as a Fellow of the Royal Statistical Society, a huge deal. In 1860, she founded the very first professional, secular nursing school in the world. And in 1907, she became the first woman ever to receive the prestigious Order of Merit from the British government. She just kept breaking barriers.
What she did was nothing less than the complete transformation of an entire field. She single-handedly took nursing from being menial labor and turned it into a respected, scientific profession. She made it an honorable career for women, and her influence spread all over the world as her students founded new schools, creating the foundation of modern nursing as we know it.
And her impact is still felt every single day. When we celebrate International Nurses Day, which is on her birthday, May 12th, or when a new nurse takes the Nightingale Pledge, we're honoring the world that she built. A world where care is guided by both compassion and science.
So that's the real story of Florence Nightingale. She proved that the most powerful changes don't just come from feeling deeply, but from thinking clearly and having the evidence to back it up. Which leaves us with a final thought, really. What problems could we all solve if we combined that kind of empathy with that kind of evidence?